We are live. We're not live. We're recording. Welcome to episode 7 of Alex's Asylum. Joining me as a special guest, Mr. Oliver Anwar. Oliver is a fitness specialist, jacked and tan dude on Twitter. But I might not do him justice to introduce him, so I'll pass the mic over to Oliver. Oliver, tell the world what is so special about your message, what drives you to create content, help people become a coach. Like me, you also worked in the corporate world in your prior life and figured out a way to stay jacked and tan through it all. What's your secret sauce? What's the deal?
Alex, really appreciate you having me on, and thanks for the intro. So, as kind of you mentioned there, I'm a coach. I mainly work now with entrepreneurs and kind of high performers, guys that are pretty stressed out, but kind of want to get healthy and fit around, a demanding lifestyle, which I think for a lot of people, that's the issue, right? Like, hours are getting longer. There's more emails going into the inbox, right? There's more demands on us from lots of different things. There's lots of different distractions out there now, and navigating health and fitness wasn't as easy as it was maybe a while back. So my kind of job is to just help those guys that are maybe running companies, that are execs that are very stressed out, try and find a sustainable way to lose the weight, be healthy, sleep better, get their wife to shout at them less, that kind of thing, right? So that's a little bit about me. I'd say my secret sauce. See, I'm not great at having a specialty for secret sauce. I'd say across the board, I'm quite like generalist in my fitness approach. I don't believe in like extremes of dieting or training, but just sticking to the key principles, I think, mainly in kind of just executing them. And from a marketing point of view, that's probably not very sexy, but it kind of gets the job done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've always said that complexity sells, simplicity works.
Yeah, exactly.
This is one of the issues that I have with Twitter kind of favoring threads more recently is, both of us are certainly guilty of, sharing content through threads because it creates more engagement. But, my thoughts are, if you need a 40-step plan to lose fat, like we're probably focusing on the wrong things here.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the work that I've done with my clients that I've worked with, I mean, typically I think what's worked the best is the thing that's the easiest and the most seamless and has the least friction, right? And I think like what you do with your kind of recipe books and your kind of masterclass is fantastic because it allows people to eat a good, tasty food, easily cooked, and they can drop fat and look ripped. I mean, that's a great kind of selling point for people, and
Sure.
fully achievable and simple. Whereas I think other people, they're like, you need to be doing this extreme biohacking, you need to be sunning your balls 3 hours a day and doing all this crazy shit. And don't get me wrong, if you're the top 1% and you're doing all the other things, then maybe look at red light therapy and all this other biohacking stuff. But I think for most people, they just want to lose a bit of weight, sleep better, and be healthier and be lean. And for that, it's just following a simple process, in my opinion.
I remember as a college baseball player, we would bring in recruits, and we want to razzle dazzle the recruits, show them that we're next level in everything that we do. And so our hitting coach, who's a great friend of mine still, I love the guy, great salesman. We'd have us do these like drills where we're like standing on one leg, and, like we're just like, what are we doing? Like, we can just hit baseballs. Like, if you want to get better at hitting baseballs, hit baseballs. Like you don't see the best players in the world doing these like crazy drills. And even if you want to drill down into some Instagram videos where kind of the crazier movements will tend to get more engagement. And so people think like, oh, you need to do like these crazy movements to be in shape. Or you see a super advanced person doing a very specialized lift that's most likely specific to his anatomy or at the very least his training goals. And a newbie looks at it and is like, oh, I need to be doing, reverse lunges off of a physio ball. Not that I've ever seen a video like that, but it's like, no, this guy is very advanced. And so when you're very advanced, in order to get from your 99th percentile or in order to go from achieving 99% of your potential to 99.5% of your potential, you do need to start doing some like pretty exotic things. But if you're 30 pounds overweight and you're eating delivery 2 meals a day, going out to a restaurant, boozing at night, sleeping 5-6 hours, waking up, drinking 4 cups of coffee and like pressing start, it's like, no, you're at 30% of your genetic potential. Let's get the basics down first before we start thinking about this complexity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, man. And I think a lot of people they kind of major in the minors, right, with a lot of the stuff that they're doing. Like I'm a big advocate of right, focus on 95% that's gonna, focus on the stuff that's gonna get you 95% of the results, and that extra 5%, maybe look at focusing on that if you have the time and if you're looking to optimize further. Which, with some of my clients, we do that. That once they've got to a certain level, it's like okay, maybe we need to start introducing some more advanced stuff. But I think for the vast majority of people that are potentially starting their fitness journey or getting back into it, it's just nail those foundations, man, and keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, from your point of view, maybe you can share with the listening audience a little bit more about your corporate background and
Yeah.
what you did to stay in shape while you had a job, and then ultimately transition to working for yourself, which is, I think, the end goal of a lot of people listening who may not be doing that right now.
Yeah, really good question. So for me, I came straight out of university into a corporate job, and at the time I was actually I'd kind of started this business that I have now as a side hustle at university to make some extra cash, but it wasn't making enough money for me to do full time, right? And I'd done quite well at university. I'd got myself a good corporate job in central London in the UK, so I said let's do it, right? So I was
How
doing
much
this
do
full.
those corporate jobs pay, by the way, coming out of uni?
Not a lot, man. I mean, we're looking at like 30,000 a year pounds. So you're looking at maybe like $35,000 a year.
And this always really surprised me, because in the US, if you go to a good school, you get good grades, your first job should probably pay at least 75,000 US dollars. And you're not
Wow.
working, maybe you're working crazy hours, but you're definitely not necessarily working crazy hours. My first job, I tell people I elevator pitched my way into Google after working for a conspiracy theorist, but when I elevator pitched my way into Google, they saw that I had no sales experience on my resume, so they slotted me at the entry level, right?
Okay.
My first year as an entry level salesperson at Google, like barely hitting my quota, 2 out of the 4 quarters I was there my first year, I made 95,000 US dollars, and this was in
Whoa.
2012. And
Whoa.
so, at inflation, it's probably $120,000 today. That was my first year.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
I take vacation, go to Europe, meet people in Portugal, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you probably make like 20,000 euro if you have a job working at
Yeah.
KPMG, working 50, 60 hours a week." I'm like, "Wait, what?
Yeah.
How do you eat? How do you buy things? How do you, like, what is going on here?" So, like, how does
It's
that work?
crazy. I don't know, man. It's a very funny kind of observation, to be honest, because the UK and I'd say Europe, the salaries are very low. Obviously you go to somewhere like central London, the salary is going to be higher. But even if you come out of university, you've done quite well, you go into a graduate scheme, you're not going to be looking at any more than kind of like 40,000 a year. It's really weird. But the guys that do law, that obviously practice as a doctor, those kinds of things, you can obviously get into those jobs and get a higher salary. But if you're just kind of a normal kind of, you could say an account executive, a salesperson, anything like that, you're not going to really top more than sort of 40,000 a year, which is crazy. And I think a big reason for that is there's not really much innovation that's come out of Europe, sadly, when you look at it from a
Mhm.
business point of view. I mean, if you look at all of the big companies, they're all out of the US, they're all out of Silicon Valley. Obviously, you're looking at the Middle East now, places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi. I've actually just got back from their lovely place. Then you look at like Singapore and those places in Asia, right? Like this is where all the big companies have come out of. Really, like how many big companies have come out of Spain, Portugal, even London? There's Revolut, there's a couple of other ones like that, but there's not really many huge tech companies that have come out. And I don't know, maybe it's the climate, the economy, I don't know, but it just seems all the big business and all the money seems to be either in the West or the Far East.
Well, I have two theories on that. I think the obvious one that people will point to would be the labor laws, which make it very difficult to hire
Yeah.
and fire people. And so,
Hmm.
that might be plausibly acceptable if you have a proven business model and you're simply scaling from one market to a new market. But if
Sure.
you're a startup and you don't know, like, okay, I think we need somebody to perform this role, but we don't really know if we're going to need somebody to perform this role in 6 months. Oh, and by the way, if we don't double our business, we're going to be out of business in 9 months. Like,
Yeah.
that makes it really, really challenging to start a company when you have those sorts of labor laws. The second thing,
Yeah.
which gets a little bit less coverage, is there's less sun in Europe. The
Yeah.
North America has a lot more sunshine. Dubai has a lot of sunshine. And I think sunshine pairs very well with optimism, where if you have lack of sunshine,
Mm,
you're going to probably be vitamin D deficient, which is going to lead to some degree of endocrine disorders, lower testosterone. If you have lower testosterone, you're probably going to be less confident, less willing to
yeah,
take risks. And so I think it's a combination of literally environmental and also the working environment.
yeah. Makes complete sense from how you've broken that down. You can see that for sure.
So, and apologies, I cut you off when we were talking about your the massive salary that you were making when you got
Yeah,
out of undergrad. Although they probably have a different name for that in the UK.
yeah,
Okay, so you're making like not very much money.
yeah.
Let's talk through like how did you buy things? Because in my mind, it's like I don't know how people would live on that type of money. Not to be this ostentatious American, but I guess that's why when I
Yeah.
see my consumer purchases, they almost all come from the United States.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so how did you get by when you were making that amount of money? What was your mindset about, okay, how am I going to like get to the next level? And then how did you balance it all?
Yeah, good question. So, unfortunately, my rent was half of my monthly salary. So, I was living in an apartment I really probably couldn't afford. So, half of my salary went to rent in central London, living in Canary Wharf, a nice apartment, which was very small for the money that you pay, but it was very close to where I worked. And then the rest of it is you basically live paycheck to paycheck, man. It's not very nice. You have to budget food. You're restricted on going out and enjoying the fine things like designer shopping, going on nights out, enjoying that kind of stuff. So, it's not very fun. And for me, I kind of use that time to, when I was finished work, to come home and work on my business, right, and work on what I have now, because the goal was to not always kind of stay in that. And I kind of realized 6 months in of doing that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm sick of the corporate politics. I'm sick of the shit pay, the restrictiveness of it. So I decided to kind of venture out on my own after that and kind of do some freelancing alongside running my now business.
Yeah, and I think that mindset is key for escaping the corporate world because so many people, in fact, probably 95% or more of people working in corporate jobs, white collar corporate jobs, really don't like their jobs. They
Yeah.
tend to pay okay, and particularly when you've gotten a promotion or two, they pay a lot better than they did when you first started. And so a lot of people just kind of wish their circumstances away. They say, oh, okay, well, it'll just get better if I'm patient.
Hmm.
I'm so tired from my work day. I just want to go home and watch Netflix and recharge, have a couple glasses of wine, and then do it again.
Yeah.
And somebody will save me. Maybe they'll have these like mystical
Yeah.
projections for good things that might happen to them if they just keep doing the same thing that hasn't been working. What I found, I think, similar to you, is when I was working in corporate America, my entire mindset was this can't be my life forever. Now, I
Yeah.
probably stayed in there longer than you. I didn't become a full time entrepreneur until I was 34 years old, and I had made quite a decent amount of money by Twitter standards,
Yeah.
by our corner of Twitter standards in the corporate world. So it made it a lot easier to transition into working for
Hmm.
myself. But I will say that my entire time in the corporate world, I was very very frustrated by my inability to scale at the speed that I wanted to within any company. And I figured that if I don't take it upon myself to escape, I will just be stuck here. And I kind of viewed myself like a slave on a plantation. Like every single day I'm thinking about getting out, and every single minute of my free time outside of times of going out, chasing women in my 20s in Silicon Valley, not that there were that many to chase. Um, I'm thinking, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here? And I think it just became part of my DNA. Like, this isn't going to be me forever.
Absolutely, I can completely relate to that because I would say that one of the reasons I got out so quickly and made sure that I could get to the point where I could work for myself was I was obsessed, man. Like when I finished work, I'd go home and I'd be obsessed with working on my side hustle. I'd be obsessed with trying to earn more money. I'd be obsessed of like when the clock finishes, I'm going to start working on this again. And I think there has to be that degree of tenacity that you have to move out of the environment that you're in because no one else is going to do it for you, like you said. And you've got to, number one, believe in yourself, but number two, really have that grit, that tenacity, that kind of like mindset to be like, I'm going to make this shit happen for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. And so, let's talk about how you're able to juggle everything in your corporate job. What exactly were you doing? What were the time demands on you? How did you fit the gym in? How did you, make sure your diet stayed relatively on point? Did you have relapses? Because this is challenging for a lot of people.
Really good question, man. So yeah, it was it started off okay. So the work demands, I was probably getting up at around 6 a.m. I'd have to be in the office for about 8 a.m. So then I'd work from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. It would then be an hour back to my apartment. Luckily, the gym was quite close. So I'd be back by like 7. I'd train straight away. And then I'd basically work on my business from kind of like 9 until midnight or as far as I had. So it was pretty full on. That was like my Monday to Friday. And then the weekends when I had a bit more time, I would be, able to kind of do a bit more stuff on my business. But one of the things I found is I was like so mentally fatigued from doing that Monday to Friday that came to kind of Sunday, I was completely knackered, man. And for the first few weeks, you're able to do this. You're able to run off the adrenaline. You're able to keep the discipline. But after a while, like things start to slip. So, I started to not get much sleep, which meant like there was more cravings each day, started to eat a bit more junk food. And one of my kind of downfalls at that time was I started abusing alcohol a little bit, kind of too much. So on the weekends, I'd kind of got a binge drink a lot. On a Saturday night, I'd be really stressed from, all the stuff that had been going on, not sure whether my business was going to work yet. I'm happy with kind of the job that I was at and that I wasn't enjoying it. Even relationships at this point, I wasn't able to really go out dating, or I didn't have a girlfriend or anything. So from like a fulfillment point of view, I wasn't feeling fulfilled, and that reflected in my habits. So started drinking a bit more. And there was one night that was quite pivotal. I remember I was stood, on my balcony overlooking London, and I just put my head in my hands after like a night of drinking. I realized I was fucking miserable. I'm like, what are you doing, man? This isn't what you should be living like. You're not sleeping well. You're not going out and enjoying yourself. You're in a job that you hate. You can't do this forever. You need to sort your shit out. So after that, I really started to try and form some really like simple habits that kind of got me back into good health around a busy schedule. So there were like 3 non-negotiables I had. I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I sleep for 7 to 8 hours a night, just get enough sleep each night, make sure that I work out at least 3 or 4 days a week, and just make sure that I kind of track my food Monday to Friday, and just do those 3 things. Don't worry about anything else. And those 3 things kind of kept me on board, because as long as I did those, I knew I would get to my result of, still being able to stay lean, still have lots of energy each day, be in a good mindset, that kind of thing, to move forward. And I think when you're in that kind of place, you just need to not worry about any kind of goal. Just say, okay, what's the process? What do I need to do to get myself out of the shit? Because the byproduct of the process that you follow will always be the result of feeling better, getting leaner, having more energy, that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
100%. And so what was your job exactly? And let's talk through the stress demands of that. And likely, if you were going to the gym regularly, the corners that allowed you to cut in your job, because we all know that if somebody's in shape, your boss is going to assume you're on top of things, and he doesn't have time to watch 15 people. So he's going to look at Oliver's. He just, he goes to the gym every night. He's probably on top of his work. I'll check in with him once every 3 weeks instead of every day.
Really, it's a very funny observation, because I came into the job very much in shape, compared as well to a lot of the people that I was working with. And straight away, there's like a level of respect that people have for you, and kind of the nod of the head if you are kind of in shape, which is, it's crazy to think, because I've always kind of been in shape for a lot of my life, and I've never really realized it. But now I look back at it, people always treat people differently that are not in shape, and you can say that it's not very nice, right? But unfortunately, it's the reality of the world, right? Like it's the way people judge things. It's first impressions. So I mean, the demands were quite high. I was managing kind of lots of different accounts, but as a graduate, they expect you to not be as quick to pick things up. And I think for myself, because I was fairly intelligent, I feel that I was ahead of the curve a little bit. I kind of wanted to maybe like you progress a little bit quicker than I kind of they wanted me to, if that makes sense. So I was ready to go on to the next stage. I was really pushing. They're like, whoa, you're only in your first year, kind of relax. And if anything, that kind of stressed me out, because there was times where I'd be working and I'd just be bored on the same mundane task, not being mentally challenged, intellectually challenged, not having any freedom, any autonomy, and that kind of thing. And I think that's where like the corporate world and stuff can trap people sometimes, because age isn't always the biggest marker of like how much you can provide to a business. I think there's a lot of young, intelligent people nowadays that can really outperform some 30 and 40-year-olds. And I'm not saying that that's, experience doesn't matter. It definitely does. But I think sometimes when they see that you're young and you're inexperienced, they can trap you in that and expect you to maybe move a little bit slower, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, it's what people don't realize when they start their careers is the promotional process is actually a labor negotiation strategy. And so the longer you require somebody to go from level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 3, level 3 to level 4, the better you can throttle the cost of employment, which is going to be the largest line item for most employers. And so they need to create all these intricate schemes that incentivize people to continue to work harder and do what their boss tells them to do, while actually not paying them more money or paying them as
Yeah.
little additional money as possible. And so that's what these promotional schemes are. A lot of people who are young gunners realize that it's bullshit, but those people tend to leave the companies like you have, like I eventually
Hmm.
did. And so the
Hmm.
people who make it to middle management are typically people who are not smart enough to realize that the incentive scheme was bullshit. And so they're actually telling the truth when they
Mm.
go to people and they say, oh, well, you just got to put your time in, everybody's got to pay their dues, and then it gets better. And then the company gets acquired by a private equity firm, and those middle managers lose their jobs 3 years
Yeah.
later, and then they
Yeah.
become really depressed and overweight and all that stuff. But that's the strategy, that's the game, and that's why part of my business has expanded to helping people escape from corporate America or wherever they happen to work, is because I know these schemes. I worked at Google for 6 years. I worked in Silicon Valley for almost 10 years, and I can understand math and pay attention to leverage mechanisms to figure out how people are trying to screw their employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely, man. That makes complete sense.
So that life that you lived sounded like miserable. You're working
Yeah, man.
you're working 8 to 6, and presumably you're taking lunch, so you're working 55
Yeah.
hours a week. You're commuting an hour each way. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Around sort of 40 minutes to an hour each way. So 2 hours
So
a
throw
day.
another hour and a half. So between working and commuting, you're doing 60 to 65 hours a week. If you get paid for your commute, which you don't, but that gets factored in, particularly if you're
Yeah.
working at home right now, you're working what, 280 hours a week, a month or something like that, and you're
Yeah.
making like $2,800 a month. So you're actually making, like, you could move to Texas and the minimum wage is higher than that. So
Yeah.
as a good student, with a good university degree, you are making effectively $10 an hour in the former capital of the world, right, in
Yeah.
London. Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
How long did you do that before you broke free?
So luckily, I kind of clogged on quite quickly that this was going to be the case. So after 6 months, I quit. So after six
Mm,
months, I naively quit, and this is maybe it was a blessing, but what came after it wasn't great. But yeah, it was. I'm kind of one of these people. When I get sick of something, I'm very impatient. So I said, "Fuck this! I'm quitting. I'm going to figure out how to do it." And at the time, I didn't really have that much savings, so I decided to get a freelance job once I quit the kind of 9 to 5 alongside running my business. And my mindset was, well, if I have more time to dedicate to working straight away, that's going to mean more money in these first few months. And alongside the freelance job, like I'm going to be okay. Now, a few months passed after I'd kind of quit the job, and what happened was my savings started to run out. The freelance job, one of them I lost, so I was fucking broke, and I couldn't pay my rent 1 month. And this was one of the mistakes that I made. Was I think if you're gonna quit and do something, I would maybe take what your approach is to have a lot of money saved up and a good little pot before you kind of do any kind of business venture. But I was young, I was impatient, I was naive, and you learn from your mistakes, right? Now, luckily, one of my friends owned a vending machine business, which is a very unique business. And I said to him, "Look, man, I need some cash." And he said to me, "Look, I know you want to run your business." He goes, "You can kind of fill vending machines." He goes, "I'll pay you cash every day. You got to get up at 4 a.m., fill vending machines for 12 hours a day, like obviously with driving in between. And you can do that." And he obviously said, you can then go home and run your business afterwards. And at the time, I didn't really have another option because I was sick of the corporate role. Like I had some ego in me that said I don't want to go back to the corporate job because people are going to see that I'd failed, and that they were right. And the other part of me just said, like, I need to just have the time to make this happen, but also make some money. So I started filling vending machines, man, for about, I think it was 4 to 6 months. I did this, right? I was in a van in a high vis driving around the south of London, going to all of the bus stations, going to like the warehouses and things like that, driving and like putting like chocolate bars, Kit Kats into vending machines. And this was one of my best experiences to date because I've shared a few photos of this on Twitter, but every time I kind of got a smile on my face when people are taking photos, because I kind of knew to myself, although I was kind of down bad at this time, I just knew that this would kind of be a story that I would tell later on when I was able to live the life that I wanted to live, and it would be a bit of a like something you'd put in your memoir, right? To be like, hey, look, I overcame this, and it happened, right? I did it, and after a while, my business started to pick up a little bit. I was able to leave the vending machines, and then from 2020, I was able to kind of do this full time, and since then that's what I've been doing. So yeah, it was a bit of a roller coaster, man, but an interesting story to kind of to share on podcasts and things like that.
So how much were you making filling those vending machines 12 hours a day?
So I was getting about $100 a day.
Which
So
is
not too
about
bad.
what you were making in the corporate job.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And obviously this was like cash payments as well. So, from a tax point of view, it was a good thing. So yeah, for this time I was able to kind of get by, I was able to pay my rent. But
that's right, because as a UK citizen, like what marginal tax are you paying on that? Say the pound was $1.20 then. So you were making $3,000 a month when you were a salaried employee. What percentage of that did you actually take home?
So yeah, I was getting about £1,600 a month, 1,600, £1,700. So you're looking at what's that, $2K after tax every month?
At that point, probably about right, yeah.
Roughly, yeah. So yeah, man. So the good thing about the vending machine business, it forced me to get up early, and I was finished by 4. And I could then I had more hours to work, right, and to actually do stuff, which was obviously getting up early is not nice. But once you finish early, I found that I could get to the gym and then kind of do more work on my business. I felt there was more capacity there to kind of do stuff. And filling vending machines wasn't hard, man. I didn't take my work home with me. I didn't have clients messaging me. It was like as soon as I shut that van off, I could finish, mentally exit, and focus on the next thing. And I found that was really easy when kind of building my side hustle up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think between your experience quitting your job when you had no savings, and my experience, breaking free when I had, quite a bit of savings, people would always say, well, what do you do to get those savings? It's like, because if you stayed in your corporate job for as long as I did, you wouldn't have savings because it paid so much less and and it didn't scale. And so the shortcut that I took is I understood how economic trends were likely to move. And I thought that interest rates were going to stay low for a long period of time, and that was going to really benefit Silicon Valley. And so I moved back where I was actually from. I grew up in Silicon Valley, which helped a lot. But I moved back there in 2010, and I just thought I just need to position myself in the center of everything. So I don't know anything about tech. I'll just go try to get a job at Google. And that's what happened. And, I wasn't like significantly more talented than the next guy who didn't get that job. But because I got that job, I was able to surround myself with intelligent people. Even though I didn't like the jobs that I was doing, they still paid quite a bit relative to what other jobs in the area might have paid, or other jobs, particularly worldwide, compared to Europe, might have paid. And so, I was able to save $30,000 to $50,000 a year, even though I didn't like what I was doing, and I wasn't working particularly hard. I wasn't working 11-hour days, 8 to 6. It's the opposite. 9, 10 o'clock, get my workout in the morning, and then I'd be done by 5, maybe 6.
Yeah, nice.
And then, and I wasn't, for the most part, I wasn't commuting as long. And if I did have to commute, there was Wi-Fi on the bus. So it's a lot easier when you understand the economic patterns that are behind where the money is flowing in the economy. But there's also something to be said about being an overconfident young person, because overconfident young people tend to either succeed or go to jail. And so,
and I'm not in jail, so it's all right.
right. And let's hope the tax authorities aren't listening to this.
Yeah.
Keep it like that. Okay, so Oliver, like, you're working with a lot of executives who are stressed out, understandably. What do you think the biggest misconception is that they have about balancing fitness and executive performance?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is you can actually do more with less, right? And this is the thing, a minimal approach to your health is a really good one. And actually, if you do less, it's going to be better for you, because number one, it's going to be less time intensive, less things you have to think about. And, you've already got a lot of stress on your plate, less stress is going to be good for you, right? So I always recommend kind of like just doing simple workouts, full body workouts 3 days a week with, a set meal structure each day of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nothing kind of too different, but what it's allowing you to do is have routine in your busy life that says, hey, look, I need to eat at this time, I need to eat at this time, I need to eat at this time. I'm going to have shit going on, but if I can stick to these things, great. Workouts, I know that these happen on these days, and typically what I get my clients to do is try and work out in the morning and kind of eat the frog, as they say, because as an exec, right, you're putting out fires in the business, or if you're running a business, you've got employees to manage. The later the day goes on, the less likely you are to want to go to the gym. And most people probably find this, right? It gets stressful, you become mentally fatigued, and you just don't want to train. So trying to find a system that makes it as easy as possible to work out, and then as easy as possible to stick to a good kind of healthy kind of food routine and diet, that kind of thing, would kind of be, you could say, the secret sauce for execs. And kind of when you do that, when you're training regularly and you're actually eating a lot better than you usually would, your stress levels are much easier to manage because,
Mm-hmm.
food has much a link with stress, and how we absorb nutrients comes down to the food that we consume. So if we're, eating processed bullshit, Uber Eats and things like that, we know that when we kind of digest and absorb that, it's causing more issues for our body, and it makes us more stressed. Whereas if we're eating good, healthy, nutrient dense foods, it doesn't have to be completely perfect, but a lot better than what you were eating, your stress levels are going to minimize. And what happens then is you then start to think, okay, it gets to the evening, I'm not so stressed, I'm not binge eating as much, I'm not drinking as much alcohol to cope with everything. I'm going to start to sleep better. And what happens, you then go into this positive kind of spiral of, I'm sleeping good now, waking up, shit, I've got more energy, I'm feeling more confident, I'm dropping a few more pounds, shit, I feel good when I go into the boardroom. Like all of these things, this positive kind of energy comes, and you start to feel like a different person. And I think it really just comes down to finding a nice simple routine to follow to begin with, and keeping it minimal and slowly kind of increasing that as you start to feel better, if that makes sense.
100%. I found, even when I was an elite athlete, that life works in a reflexive manner, where the easiest way to lose is to start losing, and the easiest way to be a winner is to win. And either direction you go compounds on itself. And so I approach my life, fighting hard to make positive traction every day, because I know, hey, if I have a bad day and I regress, it is just one day, but it's much more likely to lead to a second bad day, which is much more likely to lead to a third bad day. Whereas if I can turn a bad day into a slightly positive day, then it's much more likely that I can turn that slightly positive day into another positive day, into another positive day. And people oftentimes, and I think our education system is partially to blame for this, they don't realize that momentum goes in both directions. And so they absolutely, absolutely need to start getting these small things, small, easy things. Just do the small, easy things first. Get the small, easy things right, and then the subsequent wins become a lot easier. Stress is obvious. The more stressed you get, the more problems you create in your own life. You start making hasteful decisions. Your risk calculations get all skewed. Something that isn't a good idea seems like it's a good idea. It blows up, and then you become more stressed because you have more challenges to deal with from that bad decision. And a lot of it can be reversed if you simply fix your diet, fix your training, fix your sleep, fix your hydration, sunlight exposure, and then you're like a happier person. Your testosterone levels are likely higher, and performance becomes a lot easier when you can do that stuff.
Completely agree, man. Absolutely.
So, there's a lot of trends going on, both fitness Twitter and the broader internet, as far as you have to sun your balls. You have to, you can't eat carbs. You have to eat animals. You can't eat meat. You have to eat vegetables. Which offends you the most? Which of these modern trends do you think is the most outrageous and causes the most damage to the people who subscribe to it?
I don't know, man. There's lots of stuff out there that gets taken without context. I think one of the big ones is kind of like the semen retention kind of bullshit, right? Like this stuff really gets to me, man. And I kind of get the premise of it, right? Like if you're sat at home and you're kind of just wanking off to porn all day, like that's not fucking good for you, right? You should probably retain the semen there and not wank to porn. But I think a better strategy is maybe finding like a beautiful girlfriend to like date and enjoy time with and have sex with her maybe instead of retaining semen, right? But there's this obsession with kind of like semen retention, which is, I think it's a bit of a cope from people like not going out and taking action to be like, look, I'm going to go out, maybe try this dating thing, try and approach women, try and build a meaningful relationship, which is challenging, of course. And it's a bit of a cope. And I think that the message of like actually trying to develop good, healthy relationships with women and have a good dating life is maybe better than semen retention. But yeah, that's just my own opinion.
I would agree with that opinion. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So
what's yours?
Well,
what's
let's
yours?
See. Well, okay. So I actually think this is going to be mainstream in the future, but like I don't believe in calorie counting, and I know almost everybody believes in in like calorie tracking, and I just think that I think for some people it does make sense. Right. For people, the more dysregulated your internal system is, the more you need to rely on a tracker. Sort of like the more dysregulated your personal finances are, the more you might need to follow a budget and
makes sense. Yeah.
Right. But if you look at rich people, like Elon Musk didn't become rich by following a budget. Right. Cristiano Ronaldo didn't have an 8-pack because he was intending to create a caloric deficit and eating lean in order to achieve that. And so I think that from a calorie counting standpoint, it's easy to sell because it seems like it's precise, but if you actually dig into it, like the FDA permits companies to be off on their food labeling. You don't actually know how many calories you're burning at rest. You don't actually know how many calories you're burning when you're training. I
Yeah.
think targeting a maximal calorie burn in your training might lead to, like, it'll just lead you to do a lot of cardio because that's what
Yeah.
burns the most calories in training. So I think the calorie focused approach to weight loss, like, it makes sense. I'm not saying it's not correct. I just don't think it's the most effective for a lot of people, whether that's most people, some people, it's the people I work with. I think that paradigm is going to shift over the next 5 or 10 years. Once people realize, like, the U.S. didn't have an obesity problem before there were caloric labels on foods, right?
Yeah.
Like, if that helped, you would think the problem would, like, cut down by 75%, not multiply by 4. And
Yeah.
our obesity problem has multiplied by 4 since we started including nutrition data on food. So, that's kind of my big, more controversial stance relative to the general fitness community. And then the other thing is, like, like we talked about earlier, you don't need to get everything right. Like, we don't know what we don't know that 100% of the things that we subscribe to are true. We don't. Probably 20% of the things that I think are true are false. Probably 20% of the things you think are true are false. We just need to get the big components right, to balance out getting the small components wrong. And so that's what, when people get really technical in their approach, particularly when they're at the sub-elite level, it's just like we were talking about earlier. It's like, why are you doing that? It's not helpful. It's just adding responsibilities to your plate, and it's not actually yielding any additional benefit. It's just giving you stress. So don't do that.
Absolutely, man, for sure. And on the calorie counting piece as well, one of the things that I found is, people want to understand the overall kind of, you could say the calories in food in regards to kind of what it causes weight loss. But after people kind of understand, like, right, if I eat this amount of food and these kind of foods, I can lose the weight. There is no need for calorie counting, right? Because if you know your body and you understand that if I eat these meals a day and I lose the weight and I stay lean, then there is no need for calorie tracking, right? So actually being intuitive and, that kind of approach to eating that's very habit based as well, portion based, can also be very good, like you said, because it doesn't force people to be very micromanaging the calories. And maybe people at the start, like the guys we work with, that may be very overweight, they don't need any of the food tracking to begin with, because if you just stop eating junk food, you go for a walk and you start eating leaner meats and healthier carbs and lots of vegetables, you'll drop the weight, right? It's one of those things. And you've even shown you can get to very low levels of body fat without doing it. So once you get an understanding of the foods in your body, you're right, there's not always a need for calorie counting.
I tell people, like, go try to eat 1,000 calories of grilled shrimp. Like, you can't unless you're in some sort of eating competition. Like, your appetite should almost certainly regulate itself to where, hey, I've eaten a pound of shrimp already. I think that's later. I've eaten 1.5 pounds of shrimp. That's probably sufficient. I don't think I need to eat more.
Exactly.
There are cheat foods like this, where it's like really, really hard to overeat this. So if you don't want to track it, like, focus on eating the foods that are very challenging to overeat.
Yeah, you're completely right.
Cool, man. So for those who want to get to know Oliver more, how do they find you? You have a website? How do they find you on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram? How do we get all that is Oliver Anwar?
Sure, man. So mainly active on Twitter. So my tag is at the Oliver Anwar. Same on Instagram, which I don't really use that much for business, mainly just for showcasing my travels and other stuff going on in my life. And then the YouTube, just search Oliver Anwar. And then my website is nice and easy. It's fitnessforentrepreneurs.com. So if you go on there, you'll be able to see kind of what I offer, my programs and things like that.
That's a great URL. That's a great domain.
I know, man. It's very good. Yeah, I think it'll be worth a lot in a few years, I hope.
probably worth a decent amount right now.
Yeah.
Good investment. Might be worth your entire business. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you hopping on. I know for those who have listened, hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And we'll take it from here. Thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of Alex's Asylum.